the quashing government corruption. I would like to introduce 3 people from the Southeast Louisiana Accountability Project. Come on up.
Hello, Christina Groce. I am the president of Southeast Louisiana Accountability Project. We are an investigative, anti-corruption, victims advocacy, and accountability organization. This is Terry King. He is the author of Dead People, Crazy People, Drugs, and Politicians, a book he's going to speak a little bit about. And he is on the investigative committee for Concerned Citizens of St. Tammany. And this is Dave Karcher. He is the vice president of Southeast Louisiana Accountability Project. And I'm going to let Terry start with a little bit about his book before we go any further.
Thank you very much, Christina. As Christina said, I'm the head of the investigative committee for the Concerned Citizens of St. Tammany. What that essentially means is we're just a volunteer group that has worked to put, 29 people convicted of various crimes in St. Tammany and the surrounding area. This all started around 2009 when my wife took a job at the St. Tammany Parish Coroner's Office. And they tried to get her to commit grant fraud, and she refused, so they fired her. She came home, obviously was upset about it. And so we decided that we were going to try to remove him from office. Everybody told me there's no way to do it. He's too powerful politically. So we started investigating him. We had to sue him to get records for it. We spent a whole bunch of money and time with that. Finally got the records, turned them over to Lee Zurich, who did an exceptional series called The Body of Evidence, investigating him. And I had provided all that to him and already gone through it, so we kind of knew what was going to be coming out, but he just did a wonderful job presenting it. And then he goes to prison, and then a friend of mine at a Rotary Club meeting came up to me and told me, "What are you going to do now?" And it's like, "Well, I'm going back to work." He's like, "That's not what I mean." I said, "People are going to come out of the woodwork asking you for help with whatever their problems are." So I contacted a friend of mine who is a Lutheran pastor, but it just happened to be the former JAG of the Marine Corps Reserves. And so he asked me what I plan to do, and I was like, well, I think that if I can, send out some recruiters and start collecting information from people who've had bad things done to them, we could probably get 2 or 3 other people to go to prison. All right, so I go meet with Bob and tell him, I think we can get a few other people to go to jail. And we really didn't anticipate that we were actually going to take out, we had the coroner already. We didn't expect to get the sheriff and the district attorney. And we're apparently the only group of people in America to have ever taken out the sheriff, the coroner, and the district attorney in their Now we think we will probably get the second sheriff of Livingston Parish. I mean, of St. Tammany Parish. And, well, I grew up in Livingston Parish. So, yeah. And so we think we're going to get the current sheriff. We may even be able to reach back and get the previous coroner. And April 11th, the chief deputy coroner will go on trial. The previous chief deputy coroner will go on trial for some stuff as well. So we continue to do this, and that's how I ended up meeting Christina. I meet a lot of mentally ill people. A lot of people who have problems for whatever reason will call, and we try to strategize with them and build the case. And that's how I met Dave Karcher as well. I consider Dave, one of our investigative committee members. Dave is a retired federal investigator, Naval Investigative Service, correct?
NCIS.
Yeah, NCIS. And so he's got obviously a certain set of skills that, I'm an amateur. I don't really do anything like that. He understands how to put together a lot of the investigative materials that's very important for us to be able to move forward and get law enforcement involved and engaged in this. Christina came to me with having problems with a drug-addicted attorney, I guess.
My boss.
And she was working with him. He was doing all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And so, of course, just like me, she ends up getting charged with criminal charges, and which I guess I hadn't gotten to that in the story, but my wife and I were both charged criminally. We defeated the charges and then got the law struck down as being unconstitutional. And so we're very fortunate in having that, but Christina had similar issues. She would call me, and as a lot of people do, and you know, they're looking for sympathy, they're looking for direction, and they're looking for an opportunity to correct some wrongs. And so after repeated phone calls, I kept telling her, you need to write the law complaint, send it in, and let the system work the way it's supposed to. Most people don't want to believe that that's really what's going to happen. And so she did, and then of course, that's when they filed charges against you, right?
I filed a bar complaint, and his license was suspended in the Supreme Court. His license was suspended for 2 years. He is in the JLAP program for 5. But I was ultimately arrested on the charges that he's already found guilty of in the Supreme Court to silence me as a political prisoner. So that is something I have fought hard against, and is what has brought me to the organization that I have started.
And so what Christina's doing is playing a really high-stakes game of poker, essentially. And what's at stake for the state of Louisiana is the 300 or 400 people who this attorney represented in criminal matters and got plea agreements and did different things that may have to have their cases overturned. And they really don't want to have that happen. And so they're doing everything they can to stop her with that. And a lot of our discussions center around, and the purpose of the book is really to address Article 5 of the Constitution of Louisiana. Right now, there's no oversight in any of the Article 5 agencies, with the exception of the Judicial Review Board, which, even though it exists and they do things, it's all confidential, so nobody can really know and use any of their information when they're electing a judge, which we believe obviously is appalling that we would have something like that. But then of course we also have the governor right now pushing for less access to public records than what we have. And so our whole purpose for being is to try to force the justice system to work properly. And it can, it just takes a lot of work, a lot of money, and a lot of people really willing to take some pretty significant risks to make this move forward. And so in the book, I talk about how we go through that whole process. And then of course we were successful. I wouldn't be here if we didn't succeed. But years ago, I remember talking to Rick Franzo, who's the president of CCST, and he was like, I can't believe we're successful. We got the sheriff, and everybody's like, it's a system. And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, it's a system. I said, I can write this down and teach everybody else how to do this. And so I did. I put an appendix in here. It's about 10 pages or something like that, of how other organizations like ours can have the same impact in their communities, assuming that they have corrupt government officials, which everybody does. Not all of them are child molesters like they are in St. Tammany Parish, but everybody has corrupt government officials. And so it's how you use very valuable resources and how you engage with the media. I remember telling Pastor Belknap that he's like, how are you going to do this? I said, it's going to be asymmetric warfare. I said, they can't do anything to us, because we're private individuals, and they're not going to, they're not really the big boogeyman that everybody thinks that they are. And so we're going to have to use whatever resources we can get our hands on to magnify our message and get it out there and then just eviscerate people in the public square, which it's not a very fun activity, but it's a very effective activity to do that. And so from there, that's kind of what we do all the time now. Yeah. Facebook was extremely instrumental in the sheriff and the district attorney campaigns. Since the 2020 election, though, a lot of that's dropped off because a lot of people left Facebook. But we learned a lot of our methods from Arab Spring. If anybody remembers that, we absolutely robbed that. And that, so we'll do that. And if you look at the book here, when we were trying to figure out how to do this, I hired an editor to help me, and he said, "Oh, we have to come up with something that's going to be intriguing for people to look at." And I said, "Okay, I got an idea." And he's like, "What is it?" I said, "The infantry manual for the Army, this handbook that they have." He's like, "What?" And I said, "It makes sense. I want it to be orange, and I want camouflage on it, and some crazy insignia." And he's like, "Why?" I said, "Well, most of us are all prior military." And I said, "But we all hide in plain sight, and that's the strength that we have. Is I can walk in a room pretty much anywhere, and some people may know me, some won't, but I'm not a threat to anybody. However, I am a threat, and so is she. Christina is very, very good at documenting a lot of the legal things, which I'm not an attorney or even a paralegal. She's a paralegal, but most things are fairly simple to figure out, and it's just how do you put it together, write the report, get the report to law enforcement and to the media, and go with it. But using the media is extremely important. I don't say that just because my father was a sports editor, but that's where I learned how a lot of the tricks of the trade with that. Yep.
I'll take it.
All right.
Okay. I want to read something that I wrote, and then I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my situation and what happened and why I'm choosing to fight the fight that I'm fighting. In a fair justice system, those who use the system as a weapon would be held accountable, and all of those who conspired or sat back in silence would be held accountable, along with the ones committing the abuse. In 2021, I was just a criminal investigator hired for a firm for defense, and it ended up me watching extreme corruption in our court system through our judges, a few of the judges, and a lot of prosecutors and criminal defense attorneys. I filed the bar complaint. I didn't want to file it. Terry hung up on me and refused to speak to me until I did file it and hold them accountable. So once I filed that bar complaint, the Supreme Court suspended his license for 2 years, like I stated previously, and when his license was suspended, I was arrested. I was on a $30 bond. I fought the court system, sitting in a courtroom for my boss's crimes. No motions heard, not allowed to choose my own attorney, because it was not a crime that I committed. It was, I held them accountable. And silenced would be an understatement. For 2.5 years, I sat in a courtroom. The deputy would literally spin me in the chair, and the judge and the attorney, who they chose for me that month, would be in the back, and then they would come out and we would go home. No motions heard. And the reason they offered me a deal on day one, a misdemeanor, immediate expungement, $50 fine. I will not, and I would not, because there's 147 African American males sitting in prison that I watched wrongfully go to jail through extreme corruption. My bar complaint, an investigation into it, it would take multiple judges off the bench. And I refused to be silenced. So for the past 5 months, is how long our organization has been open, since December 4th. We didn't just get some victims of domestic violence reaching out. We have victims, true victims of corruption, being arrested, by their attorneys, their spouse's attorneys having them arrested so their client can have the upper hand in a courtroom, or victims of our current sheriff, who our goal right now is resign Randy now, or resign now Randy. We want him in prison. He needs to be held accountable for what he does. So every day, what we do is we fight for the citizens. I use my voice for the citizens. It got pretty gruesome. It got pretty bad during the last DA campaign. I spoke as a citizen. I had a lot of people supporting me, and I was really attacked by the other candidate. And it's just, our organization is here to make a change. We are here to make the corruption stop. We're here to put those in prison who are going to commit the corruption, and we're going to build cases against them with the help of CCST and Terry and Dave and many, many others that are just in the background. But one thing I wanted to talk about that I just want, it's very close to, I think what I fight for when it comes to our prison system is Jeff Landry has a lot of crime bills that have been passed. They'll go into effect on July 1st, and one of those is no more parole. In the state of Louisiana, even if it's a felony marijuana second offense, you're doing 85% of your time, no good time, no early release, no nothing. It does not matter what the crime is, nonviolent or violent, you're going to prison. In an already overpopulated prison system. It's mass incarceration times much more than what it already is. And then I am just going to share a really quick story with you guys of another situation that happened that has brought me to fighting for really what I fight for and what I witnessed with the corruption. In 2021, I attended a parole hearing for a guy named Gerard Majors, who's still sitting in prison to this day. Gerard Majors is an African-American male who stands in the field in white shrimp boots up to 12 hours a day, while bloodhounds hunt him down. And at the parole hearing, it was, we're gonna deny him parole because he's really good at his job. And he was denied parole, and he's still in there. And it's because they want them working for the prison system. They're making money for the prison system. They are making $2 an hour from 15. The rest of that's going to the prison system. All of these prisons are privatized. A lot of Republicans have stakes in these prisons. Gerard Majors is a victim who is standing in the middle of a field all day long, and the only individuals standing in that field are African Americans. And the white men are holding the leashes to those bloodhounds. And for me, that's an issue. And obviously there's many more issues. Our public records request, the public records request bill that is coming forward is with what they want to take away, some of the elected officials in prison would not be there. We recently did a public records request Dave did, for the Sheriff's Department regarding a candidate's video of all of Randy Smith, our sheriff in St. Tammany's high-ranked officers in a campaign video. And multiple of those officers were tricked into that video. But they do not want to turn over their communications for having to all of the high-ranked officers in the Sheriff's Department take paid leave for that day. But the bill that's going forward, it would not allow us to get the information that we need to hold him accountable for wrongdoing. There will be no internal communication are we allowed to receive. So I hope that you guys can support my organization. I hope that you can support our organization. We do a lot. We court watch. Yes?
Maybe ask questions?
Of course,
Yeah.
we love questions.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for doing the work that you do. Both of y'all, it's very important. I'm familiar with the case right now that is just exactly like what you're going through in a different parish. So the sheriff, coroner, deputy coroner, police chief, and my client's child was killed at a stop involving a deputy sheriff. And they rushed the kid through the hospital, out the hospital, never even let my lady identify the body, did an autopsy on him without permission. And then they told her that he killed himself, okay? And then they denied the public records requests necessary to prove that he killed himself. So she wants to know the autopsy pictures, the photos, the videos, the body camera, all that stuff. They just wouldn't do it for a whole year. So they come to me right before January 8th, I had to file a lawsuit, we're fighting this public records request. But it's so important what you're doing right here. We have to have public records. I mean, you don't have access to the public records, I mean, it's a total, I mean, it's a schism between, it's just another rip in the thread between the government and the people. It's just, it's awful, okay? Anyway, and it's Governor Landry. I know, I'm saying we don't like to do identity politics and attack people individually, but
I do.
I'm just saying, what his policies are, and because he's a Trump-supported, Republican kind of Louisiana, he's got a lot of support behind him for these things, but as far as our interests as libertarians go, this is the kind of thing that we really got to be active on, and we have to do it now. If they're trying to do a new constitutional convention, just based on what he's done in the legislature, we know that the new constitution is not going to be doing anything to protect our freedoms. So it's time to get very active in our communities, in our party, and do what these people are doing.
I want to address some of what you, yes.
What were you arrested for? Like, what were the charges?
So originally, my boss was found guilty for taking his client's money, doing no work, or being high on methamphetamines or cocaine in court while representing him. And the judge is allowing it and not reporting it. And so when he was found guilty of that, and it was in the writ, he told Covington PD, a local police department, that I went out and sought clients and said that they were his. Even though all of the evidence had been turned over that that was not true, they sealed the writ. So they refused to let me allow it into my courtroom to prove I committed no crime. But really, there's never been a crime. So, yeah.
Terry? And I was charged with breach of confidentiality of an ethics investigation.
Well, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things the gentleman said about public records. I mean, right now, if a department decides that those records are part of a criminal investigation, you're not going to get them. So I'm a retired CIS agent, I'm a retired Marine Chief Warrant Officer. I've done a lot of things that involve character, just looking beyond what the crime is, about why did this happen. I was pretty good at that. And I'm also an electrical engineer, so I dealt with systems. As Terry talked about, his book described the system that CCST developed, and I didn't realize he was writing the book, but when we started the organization, we actually started a process. At the same time, he wrote down the book. So what I do is I look at systems, and I don't know if y'all realize how much of these records are now automated, how much things are hidden in computers and you can't get access to them. In St. Tammany, we have a system called CloudGap, which is an electronic warrant system. And what I do is I gather data. Anybody that's got a case, anybody that's got records, body cam video, we're collecting all that so that we can go back and look at how things are supposed to go, how things are going. And we can also look for how it's supposed to go, make corrections, talk to the DA or whoever. What do we got to do to bring these things to light? And we also look for holes. So if we're going along and we see that this case is doing this and all of a sudden it's missing information, that's a big red flag. So that's what we're trying to do is document all of that. And it's a big project, but it's already showing some of the things that we suspected all along.
So, for instance, if I've got a case, in this case, this lady, they're still refusing to produce the records. I'm hearing said April 22nd. I've got some records, and there's inconsistencies I've identified in the records they produced. Now, are y'all willing to, are you the type of person I'll come to ask for assistance and try to prepare all this these inconsistencies
There's an attorney in
testify in court?
There's an attorney in Baton Rouge that specializes in nothing but public records requests. I tell you, contact him. Those records that you're talking about, by statute, are available to any family member of that. They can't refuse it. So it's a matter of just
Making the sheriff do what he's supposed to do.
Yes, right.
And making the judge do what he's supposed to do in a very close community when they're not gonna do it.
I mean,
Where are you located?
I've got a suit in the Eastern District of Louisiana, I've got a record suit in Tammany Parish, and I've got a damages suit in Tammany Parish.
Okay.
I got talked about April 22nd, they've given us some records, the records that like would indicate that it might be a suicide, but they refuse to give us all the records that would prove that it's a homicide.
And let me address that with St. Tammany Parish. What we're seeing is that the sheriff's office, and we know this from the DA's office, that the sheriff's office will not turn over all discovery when they bring a case and they present it to the DA's office. And it's routine. So you got somebody that's going to trial and fight it, well, the sheriff's office will hang back on, let me step up here. So the sheriff's office will hang back with any exculpatory information, anything that's going to prove innocence, so that, and then under the records law, even if I'm the one that's accused, I cannot go to the sheriff's office and get that information until after my trial and everything has been adjudicated. The records will not be released unless I get a judge order to get it released.
And what they're trying to do is to eliminate the possibility of getting that.
And that's exactly what's going on, is that the system is designed to do that. And so they get you, they arrest you for something small, and then they get you in jail. Now you're in the system, and you try to get information out of them, they're not going to give it to you. So the only way to get out of the system is to plead guilty to something. So everybody makes money. The sheriff's office makes money, the DA's office makes money, the judges make money off of you for something small, and if you don't give it to them, then they're gonna raise it up.
So my wife and I figured that out very early in the process. And she asked me, she said, how are we gonna do this? Now we have criminal charges filed against them. I had to tell my kids, hey, look, if I go to jail, you're gonna go stay with your uncle. And, which was a hard conversation. My kids were young at the time. And so I told her, I said, we're gonna get this guy. I said, he's dirty. I said, so what we have to do is find out where his blind spots are, and we can take advantage of that. And so through the court process, I was able to get discovery, and then we also found out a lot of their dirty little secrets, like the CFO was having an affair with the auditor and all this kind of stuff, and it all came out through the records, because the records don't lie, but you have to get them. And so when we brought this case to law enforcement, I turned over 25,000 pages of documents to the FBI and to the Inspector General's office to get some of these people out of there. With the coroner, it was probably 3,000 or 4,000 pages, but we only got him for some basic financial crimes at the coroner's office. However, I ended up meeting with one guy from New York who works with wrongfully accused people. And he's representing a guy who went to prison in 2007 for murder, second-degree murder. And they wanted to take a look at the brain, still being held at the coroner's office. Coroner's office wouldn't release it. Then they said they lost it. Then they found it again, finally released it. And the report said that she died of blunt force trauma to the head, and the brain had been preserved for further study. Well, when they got the brain, it had been dissected, and it was obvious that the woman had multiple sclerosis, which would have caused the unstable nature that she had, when she fell and hit her head and died. He's still in prison. The DA's office knows that the death investigation was falsified, but we've got to work through the process to get him released. So what you have to do is identify, and I'm in sales, so everything's always about how do we make it a win for everybody involved. I learned very early in the process that if I was working with a law enforcement guy, that he was trying to get a promotion or a raise or whatever. So the more good work I could do to benefit and support him, the more likely he was going to be to want to work with me on it. And so I went through great lengths to make sure that we did that. And in fact, I know some of them got promoted because I no longer hear from them anymore. But that's one of the things you have to do. I mean, you have to force the system that's in place now to work. and it can be done, yes, sir.
Well, one of the things I like that you said was that, you were able to gather 25,000 pages worth of information, and
Yes.
that's why it's so important to have this public records access.
A lot of mine, I also got, Dave does a lot more electronic stuff than I do. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm sit down and talk with somebody, and I'll walk up to them, and I've done this a number of times, put my hand on their shoulder and say, look, I don't know if we're gonna get this guy for what he did to you, but if you give me some information, we'll get this guy. I'll figure out somewhere where he's got a blind spot and we can take him out. And at one time, I was running over 200 informants. I mean, it was crazy.
I mean, do y'all offer help to people that really got a problem right now?
Yeah, we're not gonna turn anybody down.
Yeah, reach out to us and we'll take a look, and if we can't help, we'll point you in a direction or give you some data to act on, something to act with.
I got plenty of data, but I need too much maybe.
Voices.
I can talk to y'all after the chapter's over with, but the specifics of it all, but I remember.
Do you have any media contacts?
I haven't really gone media, like, I like to use media after I win the case, you know what I'm saying?
The FBI told me after Galvin, I was actually sworn in as a confidential informant. And so the guy's telling me all this, and I started laughing. I was like, wait, dude. I said, I will be your least confidential of all your confidential informants. I said, because you know anything I'm giving to you, I'm giving to the media. And Matt looked at me and said, well, Terry, he said, you put pressure on people who put pressure on us. And that's the way you do it, and we're okay with that. And so it's important to remember that. That's how the whole system works. It is still, remember, public information. The public should know about it, and the way the public knows is through the media.
How is it possible that any reason politician who ever got elected would go against that?
The sheriff that he was talking about is a child molester. He doesn't want anybody to know that. The previous sheriff to him was a child molester. He didn't want to know about it.
Which sheriff? And which parish?
St. Tammany Parish. Randy
Yeah,
Strain.
it's right.
Okay.
No, Strain was the one that went to prison. Dave took a sworn affidavit from a guy when he was 11 years old. He was molested by Randy Smith.
And we're hoping to have him indicted on
So
this.
that's one of the things that we do, is that I'm a private investigator now here in the state of Louisiana, licensed in Louisiana. I just passed the notary exam, so I can take sworn statements from people now and take them directly to a judge and get a warrant issued, instead of going through the sheriff's office. So that's
And in Terrebonne Parish, they've got a jail somewhere out in the field, somewhere, I believe it is, where the sheriff had somebody carry a whole bunch of drums out in the middle of that field. And I could never get a warrant or get anybody to act on it, but I pulled up Google Earth and went back to the time where it was supposed to have occurred, because a former inmate came and told me about it. And you could see that the earth had been disturbed during that time. I mean, it was pretty obvious they had buried something out there. That's kind of how we do it. But that guy was crazy too.
Okay, have you got any suggestions for how we can mobilize support during this current legislative section to influence this constitutional convention, to protect these types of rights that we've got? I mean,
When these kind of things happen, it's just the same as Congress and governments, where you are allowed to publicly show up and as many people as you can get and voice the
There's a
opinion.
lot of judges that absolutely hate me. But showing up is hate or not, or whether you're indicted or not, or just showing up. And I mean, I literally will walk into a courtroom in St. Tammany Parish and just sit. And I've had a deputy come up to me and say, Judge so-and-so wants to know what you're in the courtroom for today. Because it's a public effing courtroom. So let him know that he's violating that defendant's constitutional rights if he's gonna tell me that I have to leave.
She got questioned by the public defender about why was I there.
Why is he in the courtroom? Because he can be. I think that there's a lot that can be done. It's, a lot of people are scared.
that's what I'm saying.
I do want.
I mean, I was scared, I was petrified, still, you
I
know
believe
what?
I want to answer your very specific question about what can you do for this legislative session.
Right.
There's this guy, Lunsford in Baton Rouge, runs Louisiana First or something like that. His group is very, very active. Join up with them. Use the systems that are already in place.
Citizens for the Louisiana.
Yeah, that's it. I know they're going to be dialed in on that.
I would say I was the most protected when I chose not to stay home and be in fear. I was followed. I had to get cameras on my car. I was threatened that if I go to federal court, I'm going to have my bond revoked, and they know. I have a daughter who she's autistic. She has drug-induced gene-mutated autism, sensory processing disorder, epilepsy, insomnia, emotional regulation disorder at the hands of our sheriff.
Foster child.
My daughter, I was not one of those, okay? My daughter was born in COVID, March 2020. Her biological mother was in our local jail from November of 2019 until March of 2020 when a deputy drove her to the hospital to give birth. And my daughter was so addicted that she would have had a gram of heroin in her system every day for 5 months in that jail. Right now, we have about 4 overdoses in that jail a month. It's not, no one knows that. These are just things that are told to us. We've had 3 deaths in that jail in a year. My daughter is one of 34 babies that I know about that has been born addicted in that jail since 2019. So
The system is broken.
It's broken.
We got to fix it.
The system was created to work, and it's the people in it that aren't working. And we have to get those people out, and we have to hold them accountable. And
Right.
that is what we're doing.
May I say, I agree with that 1,000%, but dumb people talk about people, average people talk about what's going on, smart people talk about ideas, okay? So if we get stuck fighting this people by people issue, identity of this particular bad guy, that particular bad guy, the other bad guy, we're gonna lose the fight. We gotta beat the system somehow up here. That's why I take this Libertarian Party is so important, because at least we talk about how to change the system.
All right, so I'm a registered Republican, have been since Reagan was in office. We've sent gotten 29 people convicted, or they killed themselves or whatever. 27 of them are Republicans. So it doesn't matter. We've got to fix the system, and it can't be. I don't like politics itself. I much prefer dealing with people individually, and I like everybody to live a good quality life. But right now we don't have that, and we've got to address it. And that's why I wrote this. If you read it, we went through great lengths to make sure that people have a roadmap where they can do stuff.
How do we get it? How do we vote?
I've got a box of them here. So if y'all want to wait afterwards, I'll be happy to sell them or whatever.
Sure.
I appreciate you guys giving us the time to speak today. Usually my voice is not in a room full of people who actually agree with me. So I really appreciate it. Our website, I gave everyone a business card, is SL.A. And our Facebook page is Southeast Louisiana Accountability Project. You can scan the barcode on there. And I highly suggest following Concerned Citizens of St. Tammany as well, because they are always posting about these bills. They are always posting about the corruption, and they always stand up to it, just like we do. So, thank you for having us.